before I? Excellent. Not that our speaker needs any introduction among this group. Forrest has been a deep part of Together SC and the work of the nonprofit sector here in South Carolina for a long time, going back before he started the 1,000 Feathers with his wife, Heather. Forrest was the chief executive officer for the campaign to end teen pregnancy, which many of us now know today as Fact Forward, and just had a huge amount of measurable success, mission success in that organization, and decided, as many of us did, that he could serve the sector in an even broader scale. Launched 1,000 Feathers 7 years ago this year, and has really been all over the place. Heather and Forrest are now based in Memphis, but 1,000 Feathers is still very much a presence here in South Carolina. Casey, of course, has joined us on the call as well, part of the 1,000 Feathers team. And Forrest has done consultancy work in this sector, I would say, at the highest levels. I mean, really big projects, and moving more into systems work, as so much of the sector is trying to do. And I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but just have a high degree of respect for Forrest, because I think he's been part of what has set a high bar and standard for all of us as consultants in this sector. He is a friend as much as a colleague, and go back and I'll give my podcast a plug, only because Forrest has been on it now twice. And I think Casey and Forrest have both been a part of many blogs and videos and things. And we're just excited that he had the opportunity to come on and join us here this morning. So I don't want to take any more of your time, Forrest. Take it over and share with us what you've learned in the 7 years of consultancy that we can glean from.
Patrick, thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with all of you, but many familiar faces, some new faces, some folks maybe that are meeting for the first time. Every time I'm in a space with Patrick and have the opportunity to be introduced by him, it's just such a joy. I'm gonna have you start traveling with us, Patrick. I mean, but it's all mutual love. So many of us on this call, Patrick, you're at the top of this list. We have learned from, have been helpful to us as a firm as we have tried to find our footing. I look across the call and see people like Colleen and Mary Dell and others that have been doing this work as well and as long as anyone. And I'm sitting here this morning racking my brain. I have been doing this leading up to the call, but especially seeing those of you that are on the call thinking, what do I have to contribute, to offer that can help this group learn and grow? And in reflecting on that question, and Kim, I didn't wake up in the middle of the night, but I have been thinking about it for a few days. It dawned on me that maybe just best to sort of tell our story, talk a little bit about how we have changed and evolved. This is not a training, right? It's not a presentation. It's not any of those sort of things. It's just a conversation. I do want to thank Madeline and Patrick for extending the invitation that I think does trace back to earlier this year around summertime. We did a bit of a refresh, if you will, of the vision and mission of 1,000 Feathers, thought really deeply about who we are and who we want to be as a consulting firm. And in sort of relaunching or reintroducing ourselves to the world in that way, it did catch some people's attention. I think we ended up then on the calendar. For those of you that were talking about getting up early this morning, just a reminder that I'm in the Central Time Zone. So being camera ready at 7 a.m. did on a Monday morning was a bit of a thing, but we're here and we're all together. So I am going to share just a couple slides, talk a little bit about our firm and our background, but again, in the context of telling a story. And I hope that you'll grab a scrap piece of paper or a notepad or whatever you have in front of you. I'm going to just sort of call out some questions that have been helpful for us as we have gone through this process over the last 18 months or so, and maybe they'll be helpful to you. Maybe you'll want to jot down some notes, and maybe by the time we get to the end of it, there'll be some there, but less about what I say, and hopefully more about some of the experiences we've had, some of the questions we've asked ourselves that might be prompts for you to think about things a little differently. So let me get the tech part of this ready to go. Okay, so I think you've just got a PowerPoint now, is that right?
We do.
Okay, perfect. So 7 lessons for 7 years. That's where we started this conversation. 1,000 Feathers as a consulting firm turned 7 this summer. Patrick alluded to this in Casey Banks' introduction earlier. We've been doing this work a lot longer. I think Casey and I are going on 17 years now that she has been. We have been working together, mostly in the context of her making sure I don't screw things up. Patrick was right about that. But a decade or so as the CEO of a statewide nonprofit, 10 years or so prior to that, working in nonprofits and organizations of all different shapes and sizes, right? The collection of our team has lots of different experiences, but at least according to the South Carolina Secretary of State, and when we sort of hung out our shingles, 7 years that 1,000 Feathers has been working on all of these issues. And, we thought it was a sort of cheeky little way to push out some of the conversations and learnings we've had, 7 lessons for 7 years. Again, in the context of a story, so I'm not going to bullet these out 1 through 7, but I'll try to highlight them each as we get to them. And like I said, this is really just about telling a story. So the first thing I'd like for you all to do, and frankly, many of you did this in the introduction, is to just think about your story, your personal story, the story of your business, the story of your consulting firm. And this is a pretty intentional question of what is your story? I'm not asking you what you do, but I'd invite you to just take, 30 seconds or less here and think about what is our story, right? Somebody casually says like, what's your story? Not what do you do, but tell me a story about you, about your work, about your firm. What are the sorts of things that you say to them?
Forrest, are you looking for actual
No,
responses?
that's a rhetorical. Just
Okay,
take
okay.
a few seconds and jot down a thought if you have it.
Got it.
And again, I'm going to push out a handful of these as we go along. And if you're just jotting down some notes as you go, it might be helpful for us. And this wasn't necessarily intentional, although maybe it turned into a bit of a marketing strategy over time. A lot of our story starts with people saying, well, tell me about that name. What's the deal with 1,000 Feathers? What does that mean? Where does that come from? So I'll just tell you very quickly that our story starts in the Thousand Islands on the St. Lawrence River in upstate New York. That is the 1,000 part of 1,000 Feathers. It is the area of the country where I grew up. It is the area of the country, in fact, where 1,000 Islands dressing was invented. That's not necessarily relevant to today's conversation, but happy to talk more about the original recipe and original uses of Thousand Islands dressing, if you'd like. But that's where the 1,000 part comes from. Heather mentioned my wife, life partner and business partner, Heather Brandt, earlier. The Feathers part is simply Forrest plus Heather. And so you smash all that stuff together, a part of the country, and the two of us that founded this firm, and you end up with 1,000 Feathers. That is a key part of our story for sure. And again, thinking about what is your story? What are all the pieces that come together to form your story? Perhaps more important than our name, an important part of our story is why we are here. Said another way, in sort of sector speak, as it were, why we are here is often articulated as our company or organization's vision. We spend a lot of time, as many of you do, working with other organizations on their vision, their why, their purpose. And it dawned on us over time that ours maybe wasn't as firm and solid as it could or should be. And admittedly, this conversation that I'm about to have over the next 30 minutes or so is a significantly different one than I would have been having with you 7 years ago, or even 2 years ago, right? We've gone through several different iterations of ourselves as a consulting firm. We've learned an awful lot along the way in terms of, our practice and how we behave and the things that we do. But I think it's worth pointing out, and I'll give a shameless plug that he didn't ask me to make, but for Patrick's podcast as well. It is one that you should be listening to if you're not. It's fantastic, very well done, great guests. And you can go back to the episode that Patrick and I did 6 weeks ago, maybe something like that, where we talked a little bit more about the 1,000 Feathers vision. And something I want to lift up and point out here, in case it's not directly obvious to you, is that we were very intentional about creating a vision that for us was about the ultimate end game. Now, this is a good point for me to also pause and say, I am not here to evaluate, critique, comment on any of your consulting firms, any of your visions, any of your work. I'm simply talking about the things that work for us and the things that are important for us. This is not the right answer. It's just an answer for us. We wanted to push forward with our vision out into the communities and the people that are being served by the sector. My sense is, and I'm not, again, not referring to just folks on this call, but the larger consultancy field, my sense is that most consultants and consulting firms have a vision that has something to do with the sector. We want to make the sector stronger. We want to make organizations better. We want to make leaders better. We want to make, about organizations and people and nonprofits in the sector. I will just say that just wasn't working for us. We knew that we wanted to go one step further, and we wanted to push ourselves and constantly remind ourselves that our vision was about communities and was about the people in those communities. Our portal of entry, as it were, into communities and to serving people is through organizations and the social service sector and nonprofits, granted. So that those are our clients. But what we are here to do is to ensure that all communities and the people who live in them have the strength, resiliency, and ability to reach their full potential. That's a pretty important distinction for us. And in this context, again, of talking about who we are and telling our story, it also creates an opportunity where we're able to interact and intersect with clients and partners and be able to say, we share your vision, right? That's an important, not just a sector speak, but an important thing to be able to say as we're entering into communities, as we're entering into work with clients and partners, that we share your vision. Now, how did we get here? How did we get to this vision? Again, I think is another part of the journey here, and something that's important to note as we go through. Our story and this vision and our work has been informed mostly and in large part by our clients, by our partners, by our work. I'm not going to leave this slide up for long, but it just gives a sense of sort of the diversity of folks that we've been fortunate enough to work with. And again, I'm going to give you just a quick rundown of our sort of demographic profile, if you will. 99% of our clients fall under some larger umbrella of social service organizations. They are nonprofits, city and county governments, they're foundations, philanthropists, state and regional systems, those sort of things. We have been fortunate over the last 7 years. So now we're at 90 unique clients that have come from 17 different states and Canada. Again, just to give you a sense of the depth and breadth, all different shapes and sizes. About 50% of our portfolio is in the state of South Carolina, and the other 50% is scattered across the country. And that is true. There is some national distribution, although as part of this process that I'm about to talk through with you, we have really zeroed in on a tighter definition of our geographical service area and now serve what we refer to as the Southern United States. There are lots of different definitions for that, but our definition of that, if you think of a map or if you look at a map, there's nearly a straight geographical line that goes across the top of North Carolina, across the top of Tennessee, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. and then down from there. That happens to be 11 states: North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, et cetera, et cetera. You get the point. And our team is largely based in that area. Our service area is that area. It's where we work and where we function the best. How do I know where we work and function the best? Because that is the part that I want to talk to you about today in terms of our 7 lessons. These 7 lessons weren't produced randomly. They weren't even produced like to write a blog, right? They sort of naturally emerged through a process that took us about a year-ish, maybe a little over a year. It really is a result of us taking some of our own medicine. And in August of 22, we did a team retreat. Madeline actually mentioned the ISSAs earlier. We hired the ISSAs to come in and facilitate a team retreat for us. We really wanted to pay some close attention to, where is our optimal level of condition, our optimal operating condition? Where do we have the greatest impact? Right. On one hand, we wanted to know who are our clients, and that demographic profile or that characterization that I just went through is an important one. I do think that's something that you should all be paying attention to, and something you should be able to, rattle off pretty seamlessly is, here's who our clients are. Here's what their portfolio looks like. We paid a little attention to obviously budget size and length of the engagement and all those sorts of things, but also wanted to go deeper. The challenge we were having, and I suspect this is probably true for any number of you, is that it felt like we were comparing apples and oranges a lot, right? Like every project, had some thread of consistency to it, but they're all also very unique, right? This project, very different from that one, very different from the other, very different from a strategic plan, different from a community assessment, or different from a XYZ, right? And so we were trying to figure out a way to see, and I'm going to pull down the screen share off and on here, wanted to see if we could figure out a way to answer this question for us. What is our optimal level of contribution? Where do we do the best work? And I'm going to get into how we answered that in just a second. But again, I want to pause here just for 15 seconds. Do you know the answer to that question for you? I asked you earlier, sort of, how do you talk about yourself? What is your story? Now let me ask this question. Where and when are you doing your best work? As a consulting firm, as a consultant, what is your optimal level of contribution? And again, I'm asking that just for the purpose of self-reflection in the moment. And so again, we'll just sort of stack on these questions and these self-reflection pieces as we go through. But for us, this was a really important question. And again, some of that has to do with organization type. I mentioned that earlier, that 99%, probably a little higher than that actually, of our clients are in the social service space. Talked a little bit about geography, talked a little bit about where our clients come from, those sort of things, the type of organizations they are. All of those things mattered to us because we wanted to start to zero in and lock in on where we could have the greatest level of impact, not just where we could do the most work, right? And those are really, really different questions that we have to answer as consultants, and a little precursor to some of the lessons I'm going to get into. I used to find myself, though, saying things like, well, I mean, we put this workshop together for a nonprofit board, but it would probably work for a for-profit, or maybe it would work over here, or maybe it would do that. Or somebody would call and say, hey, do you guys do thus and such as a consultant? Like, sure, of course, we'll figure it out. You need a consultant, we're here for you. Whatever you need, we'll learn how to do it. If you only hear me say one thing today, stop doing that. Stop doing that. Do your best to figure out who you are and lock in on it. And I promise you, that the work follows, right? The financial model will follow. The form will follow the function. Once we're able to figure out who we really are. But again, for us, it was more than just the again, demographic profile, the where the organizations are, the how big the organizations are. I used to think that's what mattered. For us, it mattered a little bit less than answering two really key questions. And I've already asked you one, but listen to the difference in these questions. We asked ourselves, number one, on what engagements did we have the greatest impact? You know, you might put in parentheses, did we do our best work? Right? What engagements and where and when did we have our greatest impact? And the second question, which turned out to be perhaps more important, what engagements were the most rewarding? And in parentheses, you might say feel the best there, right? So our two questions were, where do we do our best work? And what work makes us feel the best? And you could even envision, right? So much of my life these days comes back to a 2x2 grid or a 2x3 grid or something. But you might envision this on a sort of 2x2 grid, right? The projects that went really well and the projects that didn't go well on one axis. And then on the other axis, the projects that made us feel really good and accomplished and the ones that didn't. And that took some truth telling. That took some sort of hard and deep reflection from our team. I told you we've been working on this process for a little over a year. And those of you that are in sort of strategic planning or organizational change space, sometimes when we put in front of an organization, hey, think this might take 6, 9, 12, 18 months. They're like, I don't have that kind of time. I need you to do it on Saturday. Right. We do that ourselves as consultants, right? Like, hey, I'm way too busy. I'm just going to sort of knock out my plan here. I'm going to block out a couple hours on Saturday. I'm going to turn the music on. I'm going to figure out our plan. We've been working on this off and on for 12 to 18 months now. And the answer to these two questions has been really, really important. And when we really pushed ourselves as a consultancy to say, listen, this particular project went well, like the client asked for X, we produced X, and we did a hell of a job producing X. But if we're really honest with ourselves about how it made us feel, it was sort of like, that wasn't great. It was just sort of going through the motions, right? Other projects, though, you leave and are like, man, that was really cool. That was awesome. How do we do more of that? How do we find more of those clients? And again, think about this on a 2x2 grid. Where do we do the best work? Yes, no. What projects made us feel the best? Yes, no. And the obvious thing here is we want to focus on the quadrant that we did our best work and it made us feel the best. Right? We've got a couple of projects going on right now that I won't name by name that are just like, oh my God, when is this thing going to be over? Right? And if that is the feeling, right? We don't want to go find more projects like that. It might sound obvious to say out loud, but for whatever reason, sometimes in the churn in our consultancy, we find ourselves in these situations where it's like, well, yeah, I know how to do that and we can do it pretty well, but it's not going to make me feel good. It's not going to energize me. And so what are the answers to those questions for you, right? Where the work is not only being done well and you're producing at a high level, but also where it makes you feel the best. With that, I'm going to then go from our mission, or excuse me, from our vision statement to our mission statement. And this again has been reconstituted over the years and where we have landed based largely on that 2x2 grid. Those projects where we did our best work and the ones that made us feel the best were about transformation. And so we have been bold and exclusive about our focus on transformation, and specifically our transformation on organizations, coalitions, and systems. I should also say that that process really helped us zero in on the fact that very rarely now, it's not never, but very rarely is our work what you might call B2B, right? Like one-to-one. one consultant, one organization. It's pretty rare that we are in engagements that are of that type anymore. Now, I recognize that probably makes us different than a lot of you on the call. And again, not right or wrong, it's just different. Our work more tends towards coalitions, communities, systems, collections of organizations, entities, efforts that are doing work in some cohesive collaborative function, or who at least are supposed to be, right, doing work in that way. And that's where we spend most of our time. Now, do we do some individual organization level stuff? Sure we do. But that quite often for us ended up in the quadrant of, yeah, we do this work pretty well, but it wasn't energizing us like we need to. So did we do it well? Yes. Did it make us feel good? Not always, right? So that's sort of why we started moving away from that quadrant. The way that we frame this, and this in fact is the first lesson 1 of 7, as it were, is this phrase: transformation, not transaction. And this has become a really, really important lesson for us. And again, this isn't to be critical of anyone on this call or any other consulting firm, because so many of you are doing excellent work and so much work that we learn from. But for us, the key here was to make sure that we were moving into a space where we were focused on the transformation of organizations, coalitions, and systems. In other words, producing change, not just producing stuff. And as consultants, and I am so guilty of this, and I found myself on this hamster wheel of just producing more and more stuff. But what we learned in that assessment of our clients, and again, emphasizing and overemphasizing why it's so important to be able to go back through your sort of catalog and experience of projects and understand who these folks have been and how successful you have been. As we went back through our catalog of clients, we recognized most of the organizations and communities that are calling on us are trying to do really hard stuff, right? Solve homelessness and housing, early childhood education, increase access to healthcare, cradle to career pathways, right? Like big social complex challenges. And for us, what we realized is that as a consulting firm, we were doing these folks and these communities a disservice if all we were doing for them was completing a series of transactions. Another plan, another assessment, another report, another this, another that, right? One transaction after the other, after the other, after the other wasn't going to produce the change that communities and the people who live in them deserve. And so we really have moved into this transformation space. We are constantly now asking ourselves this question. It has become sort of one of our evaluation metrics. And for those of you that are highly trained evaluation professionals on the call, I realize this is a bit of a soft evaluation question, but at the end of every project, we are asking ourselves, is this organization, is this community, is this entity, whoever we've been contracted to work with, are they better because they worked with us? Now, think about that for a second. That's a much different question than saying, did we produce the deliverable the client asked for? That's the question I used to ask. The client asked for X. We produced X. We produced the best X you've ever seen. We're going to high five and we're going to move on. And then we looked in the rearview mirror and nobody was better for it. That's a transaction, right? Think about that in context. That's a transaction. You hired me to produce a widget. I produced the widget. We shake hands, you hand me a check, we move on to the next widget. That's the sort of work we wanted to stop doing. And instead ask ourselves the question, did this organization, did this community, did this client, are they better because of us? And that's a little different bar. It's a higher bar. It's a much different question to ask yourself. And it also means that we need to do some interviewing and screening on the front end, right? Because we have a lot of phone calls like you probably do where people will call and say, hey, I need this thing. Can you produce this thing? And you think to yourself, you don't need that thing. That thing's not going to help you. That thing's not going to make you perform any better. That thing's not going to produce any change in the community, but You wanted a thing, we'll produce the thing, and then we'll go on to the next thing. That's the work I'm trying to get out of. I'm trying to get our firm out of, trying to get our partners out of, trying to get the field out of, quite frankly. Sometimes we even say we're transforming the way that clients and consultants interact with each other. And so that centering of impact for us has become really important. Let me give you just a sort of point in time example. And this is real, and many of you on the line here take these phone calls as well, I'm sure. The lion's share of the phone calls we get that are inbound calls asking us for something, frankly, and Madeline and the Together SC team, without any criticism of you, the lion's share of RFPs that get pushed out to this group from the listserv or the email serve are about a strategic plan. We need a strategic plan. We need a strategic plan. Can you do a strategic plan? Hey, I need a strategic plan. How much do you charge for a strategic plan? How long does it take to do a strategic plan? We've started asking clients and potential clients this question on the front end, and feel free to steal it. What is the challenge you are trying to solve? And again, think about that for a second. What is the challenge you are trying to solve? And you may or may not be surprised, because you all do this work, the limited number of people that can articulate an answer to that question. And they'll say, well, the challenge is we need a new strategic plan. And I'll say, well, maybe. Like, we'll figure out the product you need in a little bit, right? But let's start with an articulation of the question, what is the challenge you are trying to solve? And, again, we'll have organizations who say, like, listen, our fundraising has gone a little stagnant, or we are having trouble engaging with stakeholders, or sort of post-COVID, our team's not as energized as they once were, or we're trying to figure out if we're coming back to the office or not, or we're expanding into another state, or we just got a big grant and we need to scale up, or we just lost a big grant and we need to scale down, or my board's not engaged, or that's great. All of those things are challenges we can solve. Some of them require strategic plans. Some of them don't. Some of them require assessments. Some of them don't, right? But our frame and our focus of transformation, not transaction, has become, what is it we're trying to change? What is it we're trying to transform? And then we'll help you figure out what transaction you need, right? Or what sequence of work you need. But think about how that's different from how we currently interact with people as consultants. We are just waiting around for people to tell us what transaction they want us to perform traditionally. And it's so backwards. If we want to lift ourselves up as experts in the field, as your consultant, as your guide, as a person who can help you, then let's lean into that. And let's have those conversations with people about the challenges they're trying to solve in their communities and their organizations, as opposed to clients telling us, here's what transaction I want you to perform for me, right? You see how that relationship is different? Which gets into the second lesson for us, that relationships matter. And this is maybe obviously stated, but in order to have the conversations I was just talking about with clients, you better have some relationships with them, right? Those conversations don't go well when you're responding to RFPs blindly. They don't go well sort of on the first phone call you're having with people. When people put out an RFP and say, I need this transaction, and we write them back a proposal and say, no, you really don't. We want to do this other thing instead. It doesn't always go well, right? I'm not sure those proposals are reviewed in the highest regard, but if we can develop a relationship with people, if we can sit and have some conversations about the challenges you're having, now we can help you solve them. So for us, this deep relationship with clients really, really matters. As a result, even though I gave you some numbers at the beginning of this presentation, we have really changed our business model. We used to work with 12, 15, 20 clients a year on transactional stuff. Bing, 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 pushing it out, hammering it out. We're down now to 3, 4, maybe 5 clients a year on engagements that are more like 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, because for us, the relationships matter. And what I found was we weren't able to build deep relationships in sort of one-off things, a weekend board retreat here, a training there, an assessment here, a focus group over there. those again were transactional things that weren't allowing us to build relationships. So for us, the second lesson was relationships matter. I should also say lesson number 3, again, I don't know if these are posted somewhere. I'm happy to share the blog and or a link to the podcast that Patrick and I did so you can see them all laid out. But in addition to relationships is the idea for us that beyond relationships, excuse me, I messed up my slides here. Beyond just relationships, that proximity for us matters more. So we say lesson 2, relationships matter. Lesson 3, proximity matters more. And admittedly, and in full disclosure, we sort of borrowed this word from Brian Stevenson. Some of you probably know Brian or have had the chance to work with him. Brian has a quote that if you are willing to get close to people who are suffering, you will find the power to change the world. Right. And that is a sort of a dramatic way to say, for us, we believe that proximity is very important. And that proximity for us lends itself to one of our organizational promises that you see here, which is about inclusion. Another organizational promise you see on the screen, that's why I said I forgot to click through on the slide, but is this idea of transformation, not transaction, brings itself to one of our organizational promises to be impactful, pushing beyond another report or plan, and instead staying focused on changing the way we think, act, collaborate, and solve challenges. As you're listening to me ramble on here, it's probably not a surprise that our promise to be impactful is something that we center our work and our conversation around. We also center our work around the idea of inclusion. And again, for us, this means getting proximate. This is something that is deeper and more meaningful than just consultation. It's deeper and more meaningful than just another focus group or another listening session. Ben put in the chat, say strategic plan one more time earlier. I would also say, like, say listening session or focus group one more time, right? Like, well, you know what we need to do? We need to go into communities and listen to people. Well, here's the problem. We've been doing that for 15 years and nothing for those folks has changed, except maybe the size of the gift card that they receive. But we hear over and over and over one of two things when we're doing community listening sessions. And they are polar opposites, but they come back to the same conclusion. Most often we hear, well, nobody's done anything since the last time we did a listening session. Like, why are we doing another one, right? Why are we doing another focus group? Nobody's done anything with the last information. Or we hear people say, again, on the other extreme, wow, thanks for coming. Nobody's ever asked for my opinion, which also suggests to us that even when we do ask, we don't do enough with it. So again, our organizational promise is around inclusion. And I'm not going to go through this full slide. You all know all this already, again, preaching to the choir here, but this is how we come up with our definition of inclusion. And for us, being included is not just inviting your opinion, but it's not even just inviting your participation. It's inviting your leadership and getting into a position of shared power. When we're being inclusive, and again, think about, even if we're working at the organization level, my next call after this one is to close out a project with a client, and we've been working with them for 2 years on an organization change effort. When we started that organization change effort, and again, think of the word organization level change, they were convinced that they wanted to do all that work at the leadership team level. And our leadership team and our C-suite will figure all this out, and then we'll go tell the staff about it, right? That's not sharing power. That's barely consultation, barely engagement. But for us, this idea is about inclusion, deferring to you, inviting your leadership, whether we're talking the organization level, the community level, wherever we are. The challenge and the problem is, and again, I'm not giving a full presentation on this today for lots of different reasons, but when we talk about proximity and we talk about inclusion, the speed of projects decreases and people's comfort level decreases the more we are inclusive of those who aren't traditionally at the table, right? So something for us to be thinking about. Another thing that I will mention here, just as a couple other lessons as we go through them, I think we're up to number 4 maybe, is that, and I'm going to go through the last ones pretty quickly because I know we're short on time, but is that data is something that really, really matters to us. But we've also learned, as you likely have, that having access to data is an insufficient condition unless organizations know what to do with it. In other words, how to make data-driven decisions, how to act on what we're learning, which again is part of this pushing past another report or another assessment. Because one of the things we just continue to see over and over is, hey, we did these listening sessions, we found these themes, here are the results, we delivered it to the client, we high five, we cash the check, we move on, and nothing happened. And it was like, well, we collected these data, but we don't have any idea what to do next, right? We did this survey of our staff, we learned these things, can't wait to do the survey next year and see if anything has changed. And we find ourselves asking clients like, well, but have you done anything differently? Like, why do you think the survey results will be different next year than this year? Like, have we actually produced any action? Have we looked at the data, translated them, and done anything with them that is different? And again, you see how these lessons learned for us are not just sort of a blog post or a podcast episode, but have really been translated into our mission, our vision, and our promises. The last one that I will put up here in terms of a promise, because it gets into sort of all the rest of these lessons, is a promise to be dedicated. That transformation we know only happens when we are invested in long-term relationships, but also committed to a process. And I put all of these promises together. And again, this is a conversation I've had with some of you. We made a very conscious decision when we put these things together to call them promises, because again, think about us as consultants and all of you as consultants. It's one thing to have value statements or belief statements, but my sense of those things, and you may disagree with this, but my sense of those things is that those are often sort of internal reflections, right? Or inward facing, like our internal values, our core values. Important to have, don't get me wrong. But in terms of how we are interacting with our clients, we wanted to go even beyond values and say, these are the 4 things we promise to you. Every time you work with 1000 Feathers, we promise to be inclusive, data-driven, impactful, and dedicated. And the reason that the dedicated one matters here is because of the what is number 5 lesson on our working sheet here, that we know for all of us and for all of the work that we do, disruption is part of the journey, right? I mean, we're here on the back end, maybe, knock on wood, something, but on the back end of a global pandemic, that's the elephant in the room. But every project we work on seems to have some disruption. Oh my gosh, the CEO is resigning in the middle of this strategic plan, or oh my gosh, we got this grant, we lost this grant, we did this thing, our community changed, city council voted on this, we've got this thing happening. A constant flow of disruptions, recognizing that's part of the journey for our clients and for us. And then 2 other things that I would say just in closing here quickly. The first is that we know that for us, collaboration has been key. Collaborations and partnerships are key to our success. Now, again, that might sound like sector speak. That might sound like something that we all say, but it goes back all the way to us understanding who we are, right? Understanding who we are as a firm and the type of work we do, and more importantly, the type of work we don't do. The type of work we don't do. And I think for all of us as a consultant collaborative, the more that we can be clear about those things and subsequently put people in the right direction and recognize that our shared responsibility is in fact to transform communities, maybe by elevating the sector, that we have an incredible referral network and an incredible partnership network in this collaborative. The more we learn about each other, the more we're able to cross-reference and cross-refer. We are so appreciative of the times, and it happens quite often that we get a phone call and somebody will say, so-and-so told me to call you, and so-and-so is another consultant, right? Or vice versa. Somebody will call us and say, do you do this thing? And we'll say, no, but let me tell you who does. And here are two or three people for you to call. I think that is the incredible value of a consultant collaborative, is to understand not just what you do, but what all of us do, and that this collaboration and partnership can be key to our success. And then finally, I will say, sort of start where we, or end where we began, in context of understanding sort of who you are. All of those things I talked about, whether it be geography, whether it be about transformation, systems change, the size of organizations, the length of organizations, that's all part of our recipe, right? All that I can encourage you to do is to spend some time figuring out your own recipe, right? Because what we're over here cooking is different than what you're over there cooking, and that's okay, right? So replicating things is not necessarily the answer here, but zeroing in on who you are and the contributions you make is what really matters. And for us, and I've seen a few of you pop into the chat, we don't respond to RFPs, or I haven't responded to RFPs. Again, all part of your recipe, all part of your success. Others of you may be in a place where that's the only business generation opportunity you have in this moment, and that's okay too, right? But figuring out sort of who and how you move this thing forward. And for us, part of our recipe has been to come up with what we refer to as sort variables, a list of criteria that we literally use every time a phone call comes in, every time an RFP comes in, to sort through, is this something we're going to respond to or not? Right? And our sort variables might look different than yours, but our sort variables have to do with geography. Do we really think this organization or this client is interested in transformation, or are they just looking for a transaction? Do we think this project, when it's done, will actually produce any change, or is it just a thing somebody wants us to do, right? Is there strong leadership? Is there, right, structural foundation in the organization, right? Like, we have very specific sort variables that we go through. My last lesson to you, and it is less is more, is figure out what your sort variables are and start figuring out what to say no to, right? And the only way to do that is the collection of all these lessons together. All 7 of those things, again, I'll just rip through them really quickly. The first for us, transformation, not transaction, is what really is what's really important for us. The second is that relationships matter. The third, while relationships might matter, proximity for us matters more. The fourth, data are necessary but insufficient condition to success for us and our clients. Number 5, disruption is part of the journey. Number 6, collaboration and partnerships are key to our success. And number 7, going back to this idea of sort variables in your own recipe, less is more. We have shrunk our number of clients. We have shrunk our number of engagements. We have vastly increased the number of things we say no to. And I'm not going to lie to you, there was some financial pain in doing that. It took us a minute to level back out. This idea of being a small consulting firm or even a sole proprietor and walking around saying no to people, that's a stressful condition, right? But I promise you that on the back end, the work is more fulfilling and the financial model will catch up once you figure out who you are and are able to lock into it. But you got to stay disciplined to it. Those are 7 lessons for us in 7 years. I have no idea if any of that is helpful at all to any of you. I hope so. I think I've strategically left about 45 seconds for questions. If people have them, or Madeline or Patrick, whatever happens from here, I will defer to the 2 of you.
Forrest, I'll just ask you if we can get your slides.
Yeah, sure. That's easy enough to do.
Or at least the list of 7 even would
both
would be great.
I think Casey put a link in the chat. Maybe I saw it pop up.
Oh, that's right. She did, to your blog, to your the blog on your site that where we first picked this up. I'm so glad you put this out there. Listen, this has all been extremely valuable. I will tell you, I think for those of us that are new, this is sort of like, the younger child watching the older child going, don't do this, don't do that. You've helped us sort of learn some things so that we don't have to necessarily learn them the hard way. And for those of us that have been in this a while, I think all of these sort of challenge us to back up and go, have we ever, in all these years actually thought about some of these things? they seem to be, sort of givens, because these are the kinds of things we say to our clients, but it's internalizing them for ourselves that I think you're helping us with. Just no surprise, I think, to anybody listening to you, why you are successful in your work. And thank you for the difference and the impact you have absolutely made and continue to make in the sector. And thank you for sharing for us. This is stuff, you could charge for this online and make some good money on it. It's great content, it's just generous, and I really do
Patrick, can I
appreciate it.
jump
I
in
think
with
we
one
all
other
do.
thing?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you for that. I'm scrolling through the chat, and hopefully the Together SC folks are going to capture the chat and add it to the record, as it were. But there is one question: is there a benefit to transactional services? And I just want to answer that question with a resounding yes. Right?
Absolutely.
The field needs training. The field needs coaching. The field needs assessment. The field needs capacity building. The field needs, right, all of these things that maybe on their face are transactional. That is not anything that I've said, is not to diminish the importance of those transactions, right? Boards need training, executives need training, teams need training. We need collaboratives, we need shared learning, we need opportunities to engage, we need fundraising help, we need capital campaigns, we need all these things. Again, just for us, and I want to leave this group with this question. And again, some of you on this call are the answer to this question, by the way. But I want to leave you with this question. What is it that you want to be known for? We started with, what is your story? We talked a little bit about, where do you do your best work? But think about that on the back end. What do you want to be known for? And again, I just reiterate, for us, the answer to that question became, we want to be known for this client community system is better because we worked with them. That's our answer to that. And what I realized over time, and again, many of you on the call are the answer to this, but I didn't want to be known as being the best keynote speaker, or known as being the best trainer, or known as being the best facilitator, or known as being the best strategic planner, or known as being the best whatever. All of those things matter. And I hope that we do them well. I hope that people would say, yeah, you guys are pretty good at that, but it's not what we wanted to be known for, right? I don't want to be known for being the best transaction provider. And that's my answer. What is your answer, right? What do you want to be known for? And I'll just leave you with that thought.
Well, it's a great question. All these are great questions. Thank you again, Forrest. Really, really appreciate it and what you're doing. Madeline, is there anything else before we dismiss everyone that we need to close out with?
Forrest was kind enough to let us record it. That recording will be shared on the consultant's private YouTube channel. If you haven't been to the consultant listserv page, you will find that Brooke has added links for the leadership teams and resources for you, so you can get to everything from that page. So thank you for letting us record it, Forrest. Thank you for your wisdom. It's hard to believe it's been 7 years since you launched this, having been around, knowing that your first year, I think you were Together SC board chair. So good job.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Good job to you too.
Well, let me just thank everyone for being on the call. And thanks again, Forrest. And if our leadership team will just remain on for just a few minutes so we can cover down on a couple things, we would appreciate it. And we will see you all next time. Don't forget to go register for the February 12th with Colleen and Mary Dell. Don't forget to register for the summit. We'll see you.
Thanks, Forrest.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Woohoo.
Hey
Mary
guys,
Dell, are you
how
laying? It's Mary Dell, are you laying down?
Surgery.
Can't hear you.
Like about six. I had my surgery like 6 weeks ago, so I still can't like sit up straight for long periods of time. So I have found that this chair is my best office.
I love
Oh,
it.
now
did
what
you-
surgery? I didn't realize you'd had surgery, Mary Dell. I'm sorry. I'm glad you're feeling.
Yesterday, I had a mommy makeover.
And you went right
Ah,
out and
okay,
did that
all right.
first steps training soon after that, Mary Dell. I had no idea. I would have told you not to do that.
No, it was fun. We had a great time.
And you were okay doing something so soon after the surgery?
Yeah, I mean, it was 4 weeks out.
Okay.
What
Well,
a trooper.
yeah.
We-
Thank you. Go on, Patrick.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're a little over time, but we'll move quickly. There's a couple things I want to make sure I cover down on, and then if we can stick around, Madeline, if I miss anything, let me know. The first thing is I wish there were more leadership team members on this call right now, because I had sent
Is that
out.
recording. Sorry, I didn't know if that was. We didn't want to have to edit this out.
Oh yeah, are we still recording?
Yeah.
Desmond, it was